Minnesota versus Philadelphia, that game at 6:40 Eastern Time on Fox. So, this game here, this is going to be a defensive slugfest in my eyes. It could come down to a couple of special teams plays to put one team over the top. Nick Foles is going to have a big-time test against this Minnesota defense. He's going to have to rely heavily on Jay Ajayi. By the way, for the Vikings, this marks the Vikings' first NFC Championship game since 2009, you may recall, against the New Orleans Saints, Brett Favre, that interception, all that good stuff. This is the Eagles' first NFC Championship game since 2008 when they took on Arizona, and the first one in Philadelphia since 2004 when they took on Atlanta, and the Eagles advanced to the Super Bowl that year. All right, so what I'm looking at here, the defensive fronts for both teams, because they'll be the story in this game. I think they're going to win on both sides. The Vikings sport kind of a beefy front seven, right, with Linval Joseph and Everson Griffin, Anthony Barr, Tom Johnson. Meanwhile, the Eagles really pride themselves on speed and pass rushing ability. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Timmy Jernigan, Vinny Curry, Chris Long, etc. These guys are legit. Pro Football Focus rated them as the best pass rushing defense in the NFL this year. So who has the advantage on the offensive line to kind of combat these defensive fronts? I think it'd be Philadelphia's, especially on that right side. Lane Johnson at right tackle, Brandon Brooks at right guard has been an unsung hero for Philadelphia. Had a great week against Atlanta. And then Jason Kelce at center. Outside of Alex Mack, probably the best center in the NFL. And Minnesota's offensive line isn't awful either. Case Keenum was only sacked 22 times this season, but it showed some holes last week against New Orleans. So I'm leaning towards Philadelphia as the offensive line advantage, but make no mistake, both these defensive lines are going to ball out. Now, for Keenum, he wasn't awesome a week ago, and the Eagles generated 238 quarterback hurries and 81 hits in the regular season. So in that sense, it looks like Case Keenum better not be doing a lot of seven-step drops and all of that stuff. So, fly, Eagles, fly, or skull? Comment with your vote in the weigh-in, and we'll be tracking what you say here on the broadcast live. Let's take a look at my key matchups for this one. With the edge on the left side, well, it looks like the Vikings are winning big time in my key matchups. Jalen Mills versus Stephon Diggs, obviously going with the Vikings with the edge in that matchup. Look, this is going to be tough for Mills. Mills gave up an NFL-high 9 touchdowns in coverage and was the only Eagles corner to allow a passer rating north of 90. He's going to have a tough time against Stephon, who's coming off what probably is the biggest game of his career. You know, and if he goes on to win the Super Bowl, I'm sure that might still be 1B to what that divisional game was for Stephon. So Diggs led all wide receivers in Pro Football Focus's yards per route run efficiency metric during the divisional round. So he's bringing a lot of good momentum into this matchup. And with Adam Thielen likely taking the attention of Patrick Robinson or Ronald Darby, Mills is going to need some help. There's no doubt about it. So I think Stephon Diggs is going to win that matchup big time. Now, Everson Griffin versus Vaitai, who is the left tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. So Vaitai has replaced Jason Peters, of course, and he sports a poor Pro Football Focus grade, and he's going up against Everson Griffin, who may decide essentially this game in my eyes. Vaitai has been competent since replacing Jason Peters, but he really hasn't faced a test like this. And in the regular season, Vaitai tied for the second most sacks and hits allowed among offensive tackles. Meanwhile, Griffin, who rushes from the defensive right side 91% of the time, is one of the better disruptors in the NFL. So this will be a grinded-out type of matchup, and I'm seeing a low score. And Nick Foles at the quarterback position was efficient against the Falcons, but going up against probably the best strong safety in the NFL in Harrison Smith, look out. Because Harrison Smith is going to be balling out in this game, and I think Nick Foles has to be very careful about his decision-making down the field. So Mills versus Diggs, Vikings get that edge. Griffin versus Vaitai. Vikings get that edge. Same deal for Foles versus Harrison Smith. I do give the Eagles an edge in this matchup. Mike Remmers, left guard for the Vikings, against Brandon Graham, the defensive tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. Graham has had a great year. Fantastic year on that defensive front. A big reason why they're the best pass rushing front four in the National Football League. So if the Eagles are to win this game, it's going to be in the interior of that defense coming up and pressuring Case Keenum and forcing Keenum to have those throws similar to the one we saw last week in that interception to Marcus Williams, right? Remember that play? Keenum was under pressure, floated one out there, and it was picked off. Okay, that's what the Eagles are going to have to do in this game if they want any shot to beat Minnesota. If you are a loyal Cam Rogers Show listener, you probably know who I have winning Super Bowl 52. And so you probably know who I have winning this game. The Minnesota Vikings will beat the Eagles 16-13, defensive showdown at the link.